So continuing from the last video, I said that in this video we'd be looking at hooks. And hooks, there's basically a lot of different hooks in React, and it adds special features to your program. Now before we talk about hooks, we're just going to look at the layout here for a bit. So we have our main function here, and then the return statement which returns the HTML, and then obviously our export statement at the bottom. And if you notice up here above the return statement, there's actually some space here where we can type in some code. So there's actually two parts to this function. One is the area up here where we can write some code, and then down here is the return statement. And if you've used JavaScript a lot in the past, you know that usually what we do is we write code up here, and then once we're done running through all that code, we write a return statement for what the function should return. But in React, we actually do this a bit different. Up here at the top, we can actually put some functions that will run in our page. So we can do, for example, console.log hello world. And I'm just going to save this, and I don't have the terminal open down here. So I'm just going to click terminal up here and new terminal. And I'm going to do npm run dev just to start up our project. And I'll hold down Control and click on this link here, and it will open up our project in the browser. So I'm going to right click and select inspect here. And if I head into the console tab here, you'll see that it's printed out hello world, and it's actually printed this out 2 times. So don't worry that it's printed out 2 times. It's just a feature of React right now, because right now we're in development mode. So while we're developing our project, it runs the project in development mode. That's what that dev is in the command that we run. And that sometimes runs commands in here twice just to see if there's any error the second time it runs. And yeah, basically all we need to know is that right now it console.logs this because we put it up here. So okay, let me get rid of this, and let me close this React thing down here. We'll reopen it when we need it. So the first hook we're going to look at is called useState. So I'm going to do at the top here import use, and then it's a capital S, state from React. Now once you start typing useState here, the autocomplete will pop up. You just press tab and it will complete all this for you. And now let's try using this hook. So to use it, we need to create a variable up here. And actually, before I use it, I'm going to show you what happens if we don't use this. So let's say I have a variable down here. We'll create a variable, let x equal to the word hello. And here in the h1, I'm going to print out x here. So we can use our curly braces here, and we put x in there. So these curly braces, what it means is we're writing JavaScript inside of it. If I were to just write the letter X like this here, and let me run this. So npm run dev. If I were to open this up, it would literally print out the letter X here. But if we surround this X here in curly braces, and I save this now, when we head back to the browser, it prints out the word hello here. And that hello is coming from up here, this variable. So that's what surrounding something in curly braces means. It means we're running JavaScript inside of these curly braces. So okay, now that we have that out of the way, I'm going to select the button down here. So button, and I'm just going to say click me in here. And I'm going to create a small function inside of this function. So here below where we created the variable, I'll do function handle click, and I'll say x is equal to, and we'll put Theo here. And on the button here, I'm going to put an onClick event, and I'll connect it to this function here, handle click. So again, when we're passing the property here, remember that this is a JavaScript function. So we need to surround this in curly braces as well. So okay, I'm going to save this and head back to the browser. And look, now we click on this and nothing actually happens up here. This text doesn't change. Now you might have seen this in HTML before. What we need to do is in here we need to first do document.getID and get the ID of this thing and then change it in here. But honestly, that's a bad way of doing it. And also in this type of React layout, it's hard to do it from up here. So instead of doing this, the better way of doing it is using useState up here. So what this will do is it will allow us to create a constant variable. Now, if you know what a constant variable in JavaScript is, it means a variable that can't change its value. Except when we use useState, it actually can change its value. And when it does change its value, it re-renders the page. So once it re-renders, it will re-get x here, and it will put the new value of x into this h1 tag. So let's look at an example of how that would work. Here where we're creating our variable, let's get rid of that. And this time we want to do const here. And then we want to use our square brackets here because we're creating two things inside of this. The first thing is going to be x, which is our variable. And then we need to use a comma here. And the second thing, we're going to call it set x. And then we need to set this equal to useState. And I'll talk about what set x is here in a second. So here where we say is equal to useState, we need to add in our brackets here. And inside of the brackets, we need to give a default value for x. So by default, I'm going to set this equal to hello. And then right now I saved and it gives an error down here. That's just because I haven't finished writing the code yet. So in here where we do our handle click, I want to change this and I want to say set x. So now we're using the second thing we created here. And this is actually a function, it's a setter. So we need to add in our brackets here because we're calling a function. And now we need to pass in the new value that we want to set x equal to. So I'm going to set it equal to Theo here. And if I save this and head back to the browser, I can now see that when I click this button, the text actually changes here. So what's going on here is that when this useState hook is called, basically what it does is every time this value changes x here, we change it by using the setX function. That's the second parameter here. And whenever that value changes, it will re-render everything that's here. So it will show you the new value of x inside of here. And it will show you that new value because when it re-renders, this line will run again and it will refetch the value of x, which has now changed. It's a different value inside. So I hope that makes sense. I don't know if I gave the best explanation there, but yeah, it should make sense. Now there's a lot of hooks that we can use in React. So I'm just going to head to something I've opened earlier, which these are all the built-in React hooks. And you can just find this by searching for React hooks on Google or whatever browser you're using. And yeah, there's a lot of hooks in here. On the left here, we can see the different types of hooks. I'm just going to use one more hook here to demonstrate how effective hooks are and the core features that you can get with them. So I'm going to use this useEffect hook here. To use it, I'm going to say useEffect up here, import useEffect. And notice here that we're importing both of them from the same place. So what we can actually do is instead of typing it down here, we can just add a comma here and then put useEffect up here as well. So now we're just importing both of them from the same place, React. And now to use useEffect, we use it up here as well, inside of where we write our JavaScript. And we just need to type useEffect, and this is actually a function. So this takes two parameters. The first is a function to call, and we're just going to type in an arrow function here. And the second parameter is dependencies. So there's three options we can use here for dependencies. One, we can just leave it completely blank and don't pass anything in. The second is we can pass in an empty list like this, just square brackets with nothing in it. And the third is we can pass a variable name in here. So here I'm just passing x. And what dependencies do is, firstly, when React runs, it will first wait for all your components to be mounted, and then it will run whatever function you have in here. So this function will run as soon as everything mounts on your page, once it displays to the screen. And the function can run again, so even after it mounts, it can continue running based on what dependencies you give it. So here where I give it no dependencies, I'm not going to pass in anything as a second parameter. Inside of the curly braces here, I'm going to do console.log, and I'm going to log the word test here. And I'll just save this. So right now, remember, there's no dependencies down here. If I head back to our page here, I'm going to inspect, and I'll go into the console here, and you can see it says test there. But now when I click this button, notice that it says test again here. And if I continue clicking this button, nothing actually updates because we're changing the value to Theo and it's already set to Theo. So let me change this up a bit here. I'm going to set x equal to 1 here, and then on set x I'm going to do x plus 1. So now every time we click the button, that number should go up by 1. So here I'm going to refresh the page just so that it clears up our console here. And now x is 1, and every time we click the button it goes up by 1. Now notice here on the right hand side, this test console log is running every time we click this function. This number is going up. So now it's at 7. If I click it again, it goes to 8. And that's because use effect is being triggered every time the render updates. Every time we update what's being displayed to the screen, use effect runs. Now we can control when it runs by passing in the parameter down here of either empty array. So now I'm giving it an empty array, and I'm going to save this and head back. Let's refresh here, and okay, it says test twice there, but if we click this button, it will now stop saying test there, so no other tests are being added. So let's go back, and what this empty array here does is basically it tells use effect to run once when everything is mounted and then never run again. Now the third option is if we actually pass a parameter in here like x. So this is the same as the square brackets. It will run once and never again, but it will run when any value inside of this array here changes. So we passed in x down here, so it's going to run this function once at the beginning when our page loads up, and then once whenever x changes. So now if I refresh the page here and I click on this button, we can see that now it's doing the same thing again. But it's actually not doing the same thing again. It's not running every time the render updates. It's only running when x updates. So if, for example, we had two use states up here and they were both being used, this use effect will only run when x is updated, not when the other use state is updated. So I hope that makes sense to everyone, and you can go through that list I showed you here and check out all the other effects. And so I'm just recording this quick insert here to tell you about something I forgot to mention while I was recording the actual video. So when you use effect like this, if you create something inside it that lasts forever, so for example here you created an event listener, or you created a connection to a live server that stays connected for the whole time, down here you need to do return, and you need to return an arrow function here. And inside of this arrow function you need to do like connection.close, or you need to delete that event listener that you created up here. But basically inside of this return statement you need to clean up anything that you created in here. So when use effect is done running, there should be nothing new created that wasn't there before use effect ran. Because if there was something new created, what will happen is every time use effect runs, it will keep creating a new connection or a new event listener or whatever, and you'll end up with what's called a memory leak, where basically every time this page refreshes, it creates a new event listener or a new connection to the server, and that can end up happening hundreds of times if you have for example, use state here changing very often. So right here, whenever I change X here, this use effect runs. And you can imagine if it was creating a connection to a server every time use effect runs, then it's going to connect 100 times to that server. So in the return statement here, we need to pass in an arrow function where we say connection.close, or we delete the event listener or close the connection or whatever we created up here, or else it's going to create hundreds of connections or event listeners. And yeah, that's basically how the cleanup function works, and I'll let you get back to the video now. Hooks that we have in here. And yeah, hooks are definitely really important. They come in handy a lot, especially the two that I've shown you right here. Use state is used very often, and use effect is used for example, when you want a function to run at the beginning of your code only. So for example, when you're connecting to a database, you'd want that to happen as soon as all of your components load in. And yeah, also if you wanted to update whenever something happens. So for example, if you had a use effect here that was fetching all the data from your database, maybe you have a delete button down here that deletes an item from your database. Well, then you could put that function in here in the use effect. You could have a variable in here that keeps track of when that button is clicked. And whenever it's clicked, the use effect would run and fetch all the items in your database again to display what happened after that change. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video about hooks, and I'll see you guys in the next video where we'll discuss components. So for now, I'll see you guys in the next video.